Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for coming. This is another Sail Live. So for folks who aren't familiar, Sail is a collection of the best AI writers on Substack. Every week, a couple of us get together and just chat about the week's news. Today, you have me and our friend Jordan Schneider of China Talk. I would assume that people know who Jordan is. And we're going to spend today chatting about the politics of AI, everything from AI populism to the Pentagon and Anthropic and all of that drama. So that's sort of the big theme. And if we are watching the chat, so if folks have questions and commentary, feel free to let us know. But yeah, I've been thinking a lot about the politics of AI recently.
So you went to Washington, Jasmine. How'd that feel?
Oh man. It was very cold. It was 20 degrees, so that was unpleasant. But it was very weird because you know, it was a very different AI scene than I am used to in San Francisco. So I went to Washington, D.C. like a couple weeks ago. I wrote about it on my Substack. I think there's a post called My Week with the AI Populace. And my main goal this time was like, I'm going to talk to people who are not in sort of the wonky national security, like China expert controls crowd who I've like spoken to before. And I'm not going to talk to a bunch of people like deep in AI safety land who I also have spoken to before. But like the interesting thing I think that's happening now with AI and politics is you have all of these like political pre-existing like political coalitions. Like these are the social conservatives and these are the labor unions and like these are the kid safety folks, and they have all decided that AI is their next big issue. And you have this wave therefore of like what I just refer to generically as AI populists, who are these interest groups from all across the political spectrum, again, from the social conservatives to the labor unions, to the artists and creatives, to the data center NIMBYs, to who care about localism and states' rights, who are all like, holy crap, we hate AI and we are going to shake hands and kumbaya and get along for the sole purpose of defeating the AI accelerationists. And so it was fascinating. I don't know. Do you spend a lot of time talking to those folks?
Not as much as you do, I think, at least in recent weeks. So yeah, interest group politics at its finest now coming to the AI ecosystem. Give us some more color. Who were some characters that stood out for you, Jasmine?
Here are some characters. So I talked to a few folks on the populist right. So like, for example, Joe Allen, who works with Steve Bannon in Bannon's War Room, he was also at the Curve, which is like that big AI conference, and he's been really concerned with AI and as part of this broader transhumanism interest he has. So he was talking to me about, like neo-Luddism and how his worries about the Silicon Valley transhumanists trying to replace all human relationships with AI. I think for folks like that, they see AI as an extension of social media and their critiques of social media, where it's like, oh, for at one point we replaced human relationships with these digitally mediated relationships. I suppose we are currently in a digitally mediated friendship. But now AI is going to make that even worse because you have chatbots and folks relying on, depending on, falling in love with even chatbots instead of other humans. So the social conservatives who are really concerned about chatbots, kid safety, AI relationships were like definitely pretty interesting to talk to, especially because they are now spending so much time in alliance again with the sort of like Berkeley AI safety crowd. So I also talked to somebody at the Josh Hawley office, Josh Hawley being like the like right-wing populist who is very from Missouri, who's like very focused on AI policy right now. And they told me that like the Miri folks are showing up at their office like every other week. So they're getting like the most Berkeley rationalist AI doomers who are like showing up, booking meetings, like, how are we going to work together on this? So it's mostly like the strangeness of the Bedfellows that was really interesting to me. But also just I was like, holy crap, like this is a really powerful coalition. Like I think that if you have aligned so many bipartisan, nonpartisan, like interest groups, and all of them have their own reasons to hate AI, whether it's like any of these issues. It's pretty hard for the AI industry to mount a very sympathetic defense. Like billionaires and data
Uh,
centers are just not very sympathetic. You think they'll be
Well,
okay?
let me take the other side of this.
Okay.
So, yes, you have all of these interesting little corners of American society and politics who are raising the alarm. But On the other side of that, you have these companies with their enormous
Mhm.
valuations who are actually building the data centers and deploying the technology to hundreds of millions, I mean, really billions of people at this point. So, for all of the noise and grumblings that you see in political discourse at the state and federal level, and even international level, I guess, as we're seeing in India this week, about downsides and risks, I have seen basically no blocks politically put up in order to slow down the capabilities development, the types of products that are being built, the types of audiences that can be served by those products uh, at all. So the question to me is less that there are less whether there are people who are unhappy or uncomfortable with the pace and direction of progress, but whether they'll actually be able to do anything about it. And I think my base case, until you really start to have more dynamic and like dramatic changes in how we live our lives and work, I would take the under on this. I mean, we've already had this sort of spate of AI psychosis, suicide stories, uh, and that didn't
And
really
we have
lead
a
to
lot of
much
chatbot
legislation at
companion
all.
bills, right? I mean, the legislation is, like, in the pipelines right now, right? Like, I think they're
Yeah, there you
like,
can
that's
find
just making
legislation in the pipeline of anything. I mean, we've had a
that's true, but
we've had like internet privacy acts being argued about for 20 years at this point. The fact that there are draft bills that staffers have written in order to go back to town halls and say, "Hey, we're doing something about this. We think it's a problem." I don't think is really an indication of where power lies in this discussion as much as if anything is happening. And you don't have a president who seems all that
yeah.
concerned. And I don't really think you have a majority, even if it is like a weird bipartisan coalition one, who is all that focused on the sort of Miri style AI safety or the, Christian mom AI safety that you got to taste for the first time, Jasmine.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the way that the summary that I sort of ended up leaving with was, like, all of the money is on one side and all of the people, meaning interest groups, are on the other. As in, like, I think that, like, the populace seem terrified of the money because they know that, like, leading the future PAC and OpenAI are gonna outspend them like crazy in any primary. They also know that President Trump is, like, the AI industry's biggest defender, and no one wants to get on his bad side right now. On the other side, the accelerationist types, I don't that using that word is very funny, but like the pro industry types I talked to seemed actually pretty terrified of the regulation and the AI populists. They seemed to think it was going to be a really tough year for the AI industry and their ability to win people over. Because I mean, like California has passed its companion chatbots bill. I think I wouldn't be surprised if kid safety ends up being sort of the piece of regulation that is handed over as kind of a like, okay, we can like compromise on this one to
Yeah.
some of the folks. I think also data center NIMBYism is the other big one of like, people are thinking maybe we have to put our data centers outside the US. Maybe we got to put them in space because they're, I do think data center NIMBYism could meaningfully slow down AI progress with the number of moratoriums and stuff happening.
Yeah, well, by the way, the reason I'm talking like a robot is because I'm trying really hard not to say like an so everyone bear with me here. Let's take those two in sequence. So, AI safety for kids companion stuff. I mean, if it happens, is this gonna burst the AI bubble? Is this really all that big a problem for labs? Not particularly.
No, I don't think
I
so.
I think it's kind of so I would sort of round that down to 0 as something that the AI accelerationists who I think have never maybe perhaps some of them are just like have never had Washington been angry or been on the spotlight before be upset about. That was a stutter, which I would have taken out if we weren't live, but here we are, so I can't say things a second time. Um, now on the data center NIMBYism. Ooh, we've got anti-Semitism in the chat. This is kind of
I know,
fun.
I was trying to
Um,
see if I could moderate the chat, and
uh,
unfortunately, I can't.
come on. Come on, Hamish. What are we doing here?
Yeah.
On the data center NIMBY, everyone in the chat, I asked some other questions, so I don't have to look at this. On the data center NIMBYism thing, Jasmine, why don't you go through that? What was your little Virginia field trip? How did that go?
Yeah, so I admittedly am not somebody who like personally was initially very sympathetic to the data center NIMBYs. I think that like my concerns and critiques of AI and the threats it poses are not really data centers. Data centers have been around for a long time. They've been around since like the internet runs on data centers. Like we all know that. And so but a photographer, Stephen Voss, who's been doing a bunch of photojournalism at data centers, offered to take me around Loudoun County, Virginia, which is the county with the highest percentage of data centers in the US, just to look at them and check them out. And we drove around to a bunch of data centers, and I kind of get it, basically. I am still not a data center NIMBY, but I kind of get it. They are gigantic. They are very ugly. They are extremely close in Virginia, at least, to where people live. Like they really are in people's backyards where they're like raising forests and like you had a lovely hiking trail in your backyard and now there's a big data center. We visited a 300-year-old African American cemetery that used to be in the woods and is now surrounded on three sides by data centers that are still in construction. Like you get 2 years of construction and then they like make annoying noises for the entire rest of the time you're there. And I think the main thing that I think is going on is that, data centers, people just like don't feel like it's worth it. Like it's not just that they kind of suck in these vague ways, but also like they are these symbols, these very easily blamable symbols of like whether it's the stuff they hate about AI, like, oh, this is helping my kids cheat on their homework, or this is the AI bubble, and like now like our financial system's gonna collapse or whatever. So whatever fears people have about AI, they're projecting onto the big ugly boxes because that's the thing they feel that at the local level they can actually stop is like get this out of my neighborhood. But also I think it made me think about how people just like most folks don't see that much benefit, transformative benefit to AI in their lives. And in fact, they hear a lot more fear than they do hear benefit. They hear Dario saying it's going to take your job in like the next 3 years. And so you can see why people are not enthusiastic about like the I'm going to steal all your jobs big box showing up in their backyard. And so I was just like, wow, the AI industry really has a PR problem.
Yeah, well, let's stay on this question of leading lab rhetoric because Dario really does lean into the doom and gloom. I guess maybe last week you guys talked about his 40-page missive. Can you call 40 pages is not a missive. I mean, not novella, perhaps, of our dangerous AI future. And you're right. It's a bad PR strategy to keep talking about how the thing you're
I
developing is really
know.
dangerous. But I guess you only do it if you really believe it, right? And you
Oh my
just
gosh.
think it is more important to get people scared of your thing than you are to get them excited to use it.
Yeah. I think it's really confusing. And like after this, we can talk about some of Anthropic's other recent moves as they've been in the news a lot lately for all sorts of interesting political decisions and commentary that they've been making. But yeah, one thing that's very confusing to me is that like, again, Dara's like big point that he's harping on is 50% of white collar work will disappear by 2030. And he says this over and over and over and over in every forum possible. And I think that to him and to Anthropic, I think they earnestly care about the economic displacement risk. They don't really know what to do about it. And the people, like, they're really worried. But the thing is, like, they don't realize that it seems really stupid to everybody else to be saying this thing is going to displace all of your jobs and like destroy like the economy and like escalate inequality. And also we are going to build it anyway. So they don't really realize that Anthropic looks just as disingenuous and two-faced as OpenAI does because they too look like they are saying one thing, we're going to steal your jobs, and doing another, building extremely capable AI to steal your jobs. And like I think that like so many of the populists I spoke to, they cited Dario more than they cited like any of the crazy
Eh,
things that Sam said as the reason that they hate AI is like, dude, they're telling us it's gonna take my job. Why the fuck would we go and support these guys and like usher in the data centers into our neighborhood? And I'm like, yeah, good point. I also don't think that's a very compelling story. So I don't know. I'm just very confused by the Anthropic comms on this particular question.
well, there's this broader anthropic comms question. I think you and I and the rest of the Substack AI Roddy, the rest of Sale Media perhaps got a big kick out of the Super Bowl ad. But apparently it was the worst polling one out of all the Super Bowl ads. Like no one understood it, found it was funny. No one got the reference. And maybe that's fine. But but I think this is a decent transition um into the Pentagon stuff, really,
Yes.
because like the fact of the matter is that Dario is not particularly MAGA. Not that Sam is either, but Sam has done a better job of faking it. And Anthropic leadership just seems to not have any interest in playing that sort of game. And
Why don't we summarize it
both
really
the
quick
kind
for
of
people?
like what? Yeah.
Maybe we should summarize it really quick in case folks haven't been following the news on Anthropic and the Pentagon. Like, what
Oh, sorry.
exactly?
So let me before we get to that, like I think the 40-page article is very much like a hand-wringing liberal who is like worried about their soul. um as they're sort of like Oppenheimer cosplaying, worried about how history is going to remember them for unleashing something. Whereas if you were more of a kind of MAGA lean in conservative, like those are not the things that would be keeping you up at night all that much. But all right, sorry, Jasmine, please.
Oh, I was just going to say, because the other thing we really wanted to chat about today was, Anthropic and the Pentagon, which, if you guys have been following the news, they had a little bit of a falling out recently. Anthropic tried to impose some guardrails that said, yeah, you guys can use Claude, but not if it's for domestic surveillance or autonomous weapons. And the DoD has responded by threatening to designate Anthropic a supply chain risk, and sort of focusing and shifting over to working more with the other AI labs. I think you've been following defense tech a lot more closely than I have, Jordan. So yeah, I'm curious, like, flesh that out for me, and like, what is your read on the situation?
Yeah, so this is tricky because we are seeing the bits and pieces of what is clearly a long drawn out, frustrating negotiation dance between not just Anthropic, but all the leading labs and the Pentagon. This is colored by the recent history of Google and Project Maven, where famously there was a big kind of internal revolt in Google at the idea of partnering with the then Defense Department about having helping with drones and targeting and what have you. So um, we have this interesting wrinkle where Anthropic, given its connections with AWS and Palantir, was actually deployed, I believe, in the late Biden era, and was one of the first to be up in the classified ecosystem. Now, ChatGPT is telling me that it also through Azure has been able to, is swimming somewhere on classified networks. But this is a kind of tension point that I think is still simmering in all of these closed labs. Is on the one hand, you have very important individual, not necessarily completely unreplaceable, but like engineers you really would not want to have leave the company, in a way in which these individual voices, I think, are far more relevant to these companies' futures than they were in, say, the 2010s with the whole Project Maven arc. So you have like kind of researcher empowerment at a level we haven't necessarily experienced beforehand. Now you layer that on with administration who has very little trust among this types of researchers who maybe would be comfortable with the more spicy uses of AI in a defense context, as long as they had faith that it was not being used to blow up like quote unquote drug traffickers in making their way from Venezuela to Guyana or something. So what we've seen now is a whole lot of drama. I think Pete Hegseth kicked this off on January 16th with the kicked it off in public, at least, with the press a press statement saying that I want to clarify what responsible AI means at the Department of War. Gone are the days of equitable AI and other DEI and social justice infusions that constrain and confuse our employment of this technology. Effective immediately. Responsible AI at the War Department means objectively truthful AI capabilities employed securely and within laws governing the activities of the department. We will not employ AI models that won't allow you to fight wars. Subsequently, someone backbriefed to the press that models that won't let you fight wars only meant Anthropic because that's the company that they're fighting with. Now you have Anthropic realizing, unclear if this was reported. I don't think it was. The Wall Street Journal wrote an article saying that Anthropic models were used in some way in the Maduro raid. And this, like, I think there was a screenshot somewhere of like Palantir being open and like Claude being to the side of it. TB, like, unclear like to what extent it was used, whether it violated any past terms of service that they had agreed to on not being able to be used, not having its models be able to be used for targeting or what have you. But we have this big fight playing out in public where, kind of incredibly, the War Department is not only saying that they're threatening to cancel the contract that they have through AWS with Anthropic, but also kind of deem them a supply chain risk, which they haven't even done to the likes of, Alibaba or Tencent's model.
Yeah, I was like
Uh,
gonna say, like, can you clarify for folks, like, how serious is it to be designated a supply chain risk?
mm.
Like, what does that actually imply if the DoD or DOW, I suppose, were to do that?
Well, I mean, it's never happened to like an American company
It's like
before.
Huawei,
So,
right? Like, is
well,
Huawei a supply
yeah,
chain
yeah,
risk?
that is the sort of bucket of firms that these sorts of
Right.
things would apply to. Now, there are, it's not exactly clear which, what list that they were talking to. There is, one second, let me pull this up because I did FAFSA. Uh, so there's like, we're doing it live, folks. Um, So there's two like potential lists that this could be on. There's the FAFSA exclusion order, which is under the Federal Acquisition Supply Chain Security Act, and then there's USC 3252, which is a DoD specific supply chain authority. Now, it like Huawei and Kaspersky being the Russian antivirus software, are the sorts of things that get FAFSA exclusion orders. I'm not entirely sure what it would mean for Anthropic, but it would really suck. And presumably, a lot of other companies who are in the broader defense industrial base would now need to get waivers or something. But
Yeah. I heard
you
there's
know,
something like any company working on like a DoD contract or any DoD employee, like they just like can't be using Claude anymore. So it's like not just like you don't have the big contract and the big contract is canceled, but then actually like usage of Anthropic is deemed like a security risk at like every single
yeah,
level of the chain, which seems like very extreme.
my sense is that this is negotiating,
Yeah.
because it does not make sense to do
Yeah.
this. But there's always an aspect within this administration of to what extent are you not doing things that are like optimizing for like American power, greatness, or like lethality in Hegseth's view, but are doing something to make headlines and make the boss happy. And now
Right.
the question is like, is Anthropic is in a salient enough position in the doghouse that the Pentagon will be able to do something to this. And by the way, there are things that the government can do that would be even more obnoxious than this sort of thing. I
Got
mean,
any ideas?
like, oh, I kind of am scared to like speak this stuff into existence. But I think in general, like maybe the nastiest leverage that the government could use against any tech company would be going after immigrant employees. And that I think would just have would like I don't see this happening anytime soon, but it's a way in which companies haven't necessarily been targeted yet. I think it is something which so many companies are, quote unquote, vulnerable to, that there would be like a really large outcry. And this wouldn't be the sort of thing where, like, OpenAI would be happy about it because, like, all the researchers would go over to them or something. It would
I think
seem
OpenAI
like
just started doing legal support for specifically for their employees getting ICE targeted. So
I
clearly they're all like,
saw that.
yeah, it's all on their radar as like a big risk of like, like so many of these AI researchers. Like, I don't know for folks who are like not in contact with a lot of AI companies, but like, I don't know if it's majority, but like very, very large portions of top researchers at AI labs are these people getting paid tens of millions of dollars a year are not US citizens and are in very fragile visa situations. And if those people can't work at your companies, like you can't just automatically replace them with like the American equivalent. There are literally just like not enough people with such narrow expertise in building these large language models. So that would be really nasty. I really hope that doesn't happen.
Yeah, I mean, other than that, there's you can do we the Department of Justice just fired their adult who was doing mergers and the mergers and acquisitions, um excuse me, who's just doing the sort of anti-monopoly law. Maybe there's some that game you can get
Mhm.
into, but Anthropic hasn't really been doing a lot of
Yeah.
acquisitions over the past years. Um, I don't
Well,
know.
I'm
I'm
curious
sure this is keeping a lot of a lot of folks up at night.
yeah.
Jasmine, you got any other fun
Uh,
super dark scenarios?
oh, dark scenarios. I I don't know. I feel like we're not already like not in my favorite timeline here, which is that like Grok is the first or XAI is the first AI company to tell the Pentagon, "We'll do anything you say. We promise." And
Yeah,
so, also it's just like there's like one question with AI ethics that's sort of like, are you going to allow the AI to be used for these like nefarious purposes? There's another which is like, how good are the AI tools themselves, and what if they just like fuck up in horrible ways? And I'm just thinking about like the same Grok that did like Mecha Hitler, which like is like half alignment problem and half just like general fuck up and software bug. Like if that's the thing that's, making our supporting our military operations in foreign countries, like I don't know that I'm that excited like Grok commanding the troops. So
yeah.
yeah,
Well,
I'm also just worried about all that stuff.
yeah, there's a broader question I hear, which I'm thinking about, which is maybe the more germane one, is that we're, this technology is really important, and it is going to be the sort of thing that leads to the most productivity improvements for white collar workers, as well as most likely the pointy end of the stick over the next 5 years. And I think there is a world like the one you laid out, Jasmine, where the left of center um, uh, employee bases of Google, Anthropic, and OpenAI just come to the conclusion that they are not comfortable with this Pentagon being able to use their technology to push it as far as you could, which on the one hand may lead to some of the kind of scary downside scenarios you have, but also is what is going to make a military effective in the 21st century. So then we have an America who is having to rely on Grok, which is not great from a safety perspective, but also not great from a capability perspective. And as much as I don't want the Pentagon to start stupid wars, I also don't want them to lose them. And if you are going up against an adversary that is able to better utilize some of the most frontier technology, that that that's a problem. So Michael Emil, who runs R and E in the excuse me, Emil Michael, his names are he's got the first name in the back. Emil Michael, who runs R&E at the Pentagon, has been striking a more conciliatory tone. He's been saying, we've been wanting all four companies to hear the same principle. We want to use any model for all use cases. And, he's hopeful that they'll be able to come to agreements, and said that Anthropic is the only holdout. So maybe the dynamic is that like OpenAI and Google have kind of come to some happy medium where they're not used for everything, but they have some kind of visibility, perhaps. And Anthropic is just like holding a tighter line in this negotiation, which is why this is spilled into the public arena. I would like them to all come to a happy solution,
Yeah.
because I do think not having this stuff anywhere in the building is probably more dangerous than the other way around.
Yeah, I feel like Anthropic's bet, like you really see this sort of like race to the top framing here, where like their bet and their hope as an entire company, frankly, is that they will be so much on the frontier and that their models will be such a tier above others. A thing which I'm like not sure is like gonna work as a strategy, but like that they can set the terms of the negotiations, right? Like Anthropic is basically saying, we're hoping that you guys need Claude Code so bad out there, and that Claude Code is so much better than everyone else, that you will agree to our much more restrictive terms relative to OpenAI and Google and XAI, which are sort of just like, if it's legal, you can do it. Because Anthropic is basically saying, like, we have a better sense of what a democratic AI is than you guys are. We don't trust you, the US government, to sort of decide what's within and out of bounds. And like, I can see both where the principle on that comes from, why that's challenging for folks. I'm curious, Jordan, do you know of any precedents where sort of defense contractors or suppliers to the Pentagon have had such kind of red lines in their policies?
I'm not sure. I mean, usually, like, you have a contract, right? And it says what you're willing to do. And the weird thing about this is it's this, like, magical multi-purpose technology, where I think drawing those guardrails is probably a lot less straightforward than, like, okay, look, I'm a food provider. Like, I'm gonna make you a million commissary meals, and I'm not gonna feel morally conflicted about, like, what you do after lunch, because I'm just a food provider. And then you have this whole universe of defense contractors, who are sort of serve this ecosystem and are not particularly concerned with this. But because we're in this really interesting, unique moment where the dual use technology, which is most relevant to the future, is developed by people like who were not thinking about. Who weren't building it expecting to become a defense company, but I mean, I think Dario has like talked about this explicitly, saying like, "Hey, like we've been focused on these use cases for a really long time. We've been in the Pentagon really early because we want to help these broader national security objectives, but um, we're going to only do it on sort of terms that are comfortable to our leadership team." So
Yeah.
I don't know. It
So
feels
is
it feels
their
kind of
outcome just gonna
unprecedented
be
to me.
like, even if they manage to like, okay, they manage not to get designated as supply chain risk, they manage not to get all of their contracts canceled, like, is it just gonna be like, okay, they can work with Anthropic on like foreign operations and whatever, but like they just use Grok or they use ChatGPT for domestic surveillance and the things that Anthropic won't do. I guess it just feels like, because, and I noticed like all over this sort of like AI safety ecosystem, like the fact that you have like 3 to 4 players that are frankly like pretty close in capabilities, and like that one at the top swaps out every like month now with every new release. It just feels really hard for any one company to be able to like hold meaningful red lines, because like there's just so much of a competitive incentive for your competitors to get in the game.
Yeah, well, the thing is, at the end of the day, a $200 million contract is not all that commercially relevant for Anthropic, right? They will sink or swim based on how good their models are, as well as their enterprise and consumer adoption. The down and I think I've talked to a fair amount of these. Um, not just saying, not particularly Anthropic, but broadly in the AI community, who say, "Look, like, we're working with the government because we think it's important, not because it is the highest ROI place to spend our engineering time and BD dollars." So, if the Pentagon really does something so obnoxious as to make it so that JP Morgan and Bank of America and Accenture can't work with Anthropic because they're at the same level as Huawei or something. Yeah, that would be a big deal for the future economic prospects of the company. But I wouldn't necessarily say that this is a make or break
Mhm.
thing
So you think the
commercially.
Pentagon needs Anthropic more than Anthropic needs the Pentagon?
Um, I think that I think Hegseth likes culture wars. Um, and I do think that the Pentagon needs frontier lab access. I would expect if my guess is that if the Pentagon wants a 10 out of 10 full carte blanche, I would imagine that OpenAI and Google are probably willing to give them, you know, 5 or 6, and Anthropic is maybe around 3 or 4. Or maybe that's not even the case, and they're just like having fun picking on Anthropic because their leader is, because they're like dem coded or woke coded or something. Um, well, I'm not entirely sure. I don't think the whole story's out yet.
Yeah. Yeah, real. Cool. Well,
Should we do some
anything else or
questions?
yeah, we can do questions. I mean, Irene asked about immigrant workers at AI labs restricting potentials for employee dissent. I think 100% that the fact that so many immigrant workers are at AI labs mean that not nobody, much fewer people are talking about politics. I mean, yeah, I feel like even outside of AI labs, but like my friends in the tech ecosystem who are on visas of any kind have a lot of them have basically said very explicitly, I wish I could say something about ICE or Minneapolis or my company or anything, but I have totally locked down on social media because they are doing social media reviews of people re-entering the United States and no one wants to get stuck. So, yeah.
Yeah. And we should recall that this is a new thing. Immigrants didn't used to be scared about getting deported for tweeting about politics, which is kind of a bummer, but here we
Oh,
are.
it's a bummer. Yeah. Do you want to take Justin's question about AI giants gaining leverage over sovereign nations, like with Starlink?
Um, yeah, well, we kind of explored that of like to what extent could the federal government really pick favorites when it came to its frontier labs. I think I- I'm I'm still pretty skeptical that they're really going to be like the president is really going to be the person taking the wheel on this. In a sort of like lab. Uh, what's the opposite of agnostic? In a lab specific way.
Bias?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's also I think it would be a little different if Grok was a serious competitor, and it doesn't
Mhm.
really seem to be that case right now. But in a world where you're not making a real trade-off in capabilities to go with the the unwoke politically aligned one, maybe. And that's a possibility that could arise over the next few years, to be sure.
Do you think there are meaningful differences between this situation and Project Maven?
Yeah, I think Project Maven was just I mean, besides what we talked about, I mean, I think like there's a it feels a little more real now. I mean, I think Project Maven was at 20. When was Project
It was
Maven?
2018 or 19, I think.
Yeah, so it was
Trump won.
it was Trump won.
It was
I
much
mean, we
louder of an employee protest, I feel like. Like in this one, it's like we saw reporting that like maybe some senior Anthropic executive was a little bit cagey about the Maduro stuff. But
yeah,
that one was much more of like a popular like signatories on a petition type situation.
And I think the Maven stuff was data labeling and was kind of a few steps to the left of what may be capable today and in the future, which is more direct autonomy, which is powered by these models. So I do feel like the stakes are higher, and the kind of what Project Maven was offering to do, um, more companies could have stepped in to execute. I mean, that's basically what ended up um, happening with Amazon basically saying, "Yo, we got this. Don't worry about it." Now, again, because we only really have 3 credible players to this, there's a slightly different dynamic, and I think all of them are a little cagey in a way that a mainline Microsoft or a mainline Amazon would not really have a problem with.
Yeah. I feel like my high level take on this Anthropic thing is just like they are walking an incredibly weird and difficult line. Like I was listening to the Dorkesh podcast with Dario that came out recently, and Dorkesh presses him on this democracy stuff, which I thought was like the weirdest part of the long 40-page essay where Dario basically like lists out all of these risks. Like AI could make mass surveillance worse. It could have all, there might be these rogue AI problems. It might be misused by terrorists, blah, 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 blah. And he says like, but I think AI will actually strengthen democracy because it will make all the other options seem so bad. And autocracy would be so bad and so unimaginable that everyone will just become more democratic as a result of AGI. It was like an insane argument. And so Durkesh like presses him on this in the podcast. He's like, why do you say this? Like, this doesn't really seem to make any sense. And then Dario kind of like says maybe a lot, repeats the same thing again, where he's like, what if the authoritarian crises because of AGI are so bad that people will fight even harder to not have autocracies? Which seems, again, like an crazy argument. And then he said, maybe AI will have inherent properties that are dissolving of authoritarianism. And then he says, we thought that was true with the internet and social media, and it wasn't true, but it might be true this time, maybe. And so it's worth a try. And it was like, this is like the least reassuring thing I've ever heard. And the way that I read it is kind of like, it just seems to me like Dario kind of knows in his heart that in the default path forward, not the only possible world, but in the default path forward, the thing he is trying to build will probably strengthen authoritarians by giving them autonomous weapons, giving them ways to surveil all of their populations and all of the foreign populations, and generally make authoritarianism easier and democracy harder. I feel like he knows this, and he's like unable to defend his position that he must hold that the thing he is building will be good for democracy, as he just sort of like fumbles his way through interviews where he's asked about this. But this makes me very concerned. Like, I'm like,
Well,
you
I
gotta come
think
up
the
with some better
position that
answers,
he
man.
holds is that yes, it may be really bad, but trust me more than Sam,
Right,
right?
exactly.
Like
Yes,
that's
it's
all
gonna
he
be
has to fall back on.
yes, it's inevitable, and if I don't do it, Sam's gonna do it, and Sam's version will be worse, or Elon's version will be worse. And like, maybe that's true. I think that is plausible to me. That I like personally, I think I trust Dario more than I trust Sam Altman to run this. But it is just like, I don't know. I just like found that answer very bleak.
Well, it's weird that we have someone who clearly has spent a lot of time on effective altruism forums running one of the most important companies in the world today. And Sam kind of cosplayed at it a little bit in the early days because it was an important thing to recruit talent. But look, this guy's he builds businesses.
Yeah,
He's a
he's a YC
VC.
guy.
Yeah,
Hey,
that is
Luke,
the core
he
of
wears
his
three
being.
pop collars like
Yeah.
on top of each other.
And Google's a public company, Elon is Elon, and then we just have Dario, who
Yeah,
is
he's so
not is
tortured.
yeah, he's poor
So
guy.
tortured. I know. He's so
He needs
stressed
a
all the
little
time.
AI to hug him at night. There's a lot on your shoulders if you think that you are the only one holding you and the norms you set are the only one holding back the robot apocalypse.
Yeah. Yeah, which does sort of tie back to the start of our conversation about AI populism, because I think this is why people are so skeptical of AI. Like the fact that the most safety focused, most anti-MAGA, most like responsible, conscious AI leader, the best he can say is, we are taking all your jobs and we think this might be good for democracy, but also probably it won't, and I can't really explain it. And I think that's why a lot of people are like, okay, I don't really see how this is helping me. You guys seem like you're obsessed with your own crazy power plays. I don't want this to happen anymore. And so, anyway, I found myself having a pretty bad couple weeks for thinking about AI in our political future.
I mean, we're not gonna have good weeks. Like, it's kind of fun where I have a handful of social media mutuals who now work at the like positive deployments corners of OpenAI and Anthropic. And they're like,
Mhm.
they have these little LinkedIn posts where they're like, oh yeah, we're partnering with this state in India's
Yeah,
education system. And
I
we just
know.
deployed to 2,000 schools, or, it's nonprofit week. So we've launched these new tools to help nonprofits run better. It's like, oh, I mean, that's nice, but
Still good.
it's not the game. Like, this is the
I
game,
know.
is all this other stuff. And, I appreciate the effort and energy. The Open AI Foundation will be a cool thing. Like, that is a
Yeah,
outrageously large amount of money, which hopefully will be
totally.
put toward things that don't involve, drones and death. But I don't know. This is
Yeah.
really tricky stuff.
Also, the other thing I'm watching is the employees are like assuming that IPOs happen. There's going to be so many millionaires and billionaires created overnight among an employee base at both companies that is much more left leaning than their executives and probably less politically aligned and conscious than some of the executives are. So we're going to see some crazy political and philanthropic donations. Like I like there has to be somebody tracking the waves of like tens of millions of dollars that are going to go into political campaigns in the midterms and random philanthropic causes like shrimp welfare over the next year. Like I think this is going to be one of the biggest years for philanthropy period, but it's going to look very strange. And also like what's it going to be like for say OpenAI if it's true, and I don't know if it will be true, that their employees donate to say overwhelmingly left-leaning political candidates while Greg Brockman is still trying to play the MAGA game. Like I'm not really sure.
Yeah, but I mean, it's one thing to make money; it's another to give it away. I don't know. I mean, we'll see.
I don't know. I think a lot of people are gonna like. I think the internal social pressure, Anthropic more than OpenAI, of course, but at the labs to give away large portions of your income is like very unlike previous generations of
Interesting.
tech wealth. I think they'll keep plenty of it, but just like I've seen at these house parties, people being like, "You're only donating like 10%. I've pledged 25," and they're kind of like one upping each other on the amount of their pledges. They're starting to already plan out their donations. Again, I think they'll keep the
Okay.
majority for themselves, but I think we're going to see some crazy, crazy giving.
Yeah. Like to where's your nonprofit, Jasmine? You gotta get ahead of this.
I know. I gotta stand up a 501(c)(3) for Jasmine Sun Media ASAP so I can receive some of this IPO wealth. That's what I really need to do.
All right. Well,
Okay.
this is brought to you, I guess, by Jasmine's upcoming 501(c)(3). Why don't you pitch sale on our way out?
Okay, amazing. Thanks, guys, for listening. This is a live hosted by Sale Media, which once again is a collection of the best AI writers on Substack. If you work at a corporation or run a corporation, you can purchase team subscriptions at a discount by going to readsale.com. You can also subscribe individually to me and Jordan if you click the button that is on your screen right now. Thanks so much. We'll be back next week at 11 a.m. Pacific time on Thursday.
Woo!
Oh no, I don't know how to end this call. Okay.